I'm Julian Simon. I'm an economist by trade. I teach business administration at the University of Maryland for a living. And I've spent most of my time the last 20 years writing about the economics of population, about the effects of more and fewer people on other people. Let me begin with some of the facts of life. The most important and exciting event that's occurred in the whole history of civilization has occurred in the last 200 years in the richest countries in the world. 200 years ago in France, which was then the richest country in the world, the chance of a person who was born of living beyond the age of 27, 28, 29 was just about 50-50. That is, the life expectancy of the average person in the richest country in the world was less than 30 years. And it had been less than 30 years for 10,000 years, 20,000 years, a very, very long time. Very, very little had happened over the whole history of the human enterprise. And then just in the past 200 years, which is a mere blip in history, life expectancy at birth has gone up from under 30 to well over 70 in the rich countries in the world. And in the poorer countries of the world, another extraordinary achievement has occurred. In just the 30 or 40 years since World War II, life expectancy has gone up 15 or 20 years throughout the whole poor part of the world. So I ask you, has anything else that's ever happened in human history come close to this in its importance? This has meant that people have not only lived longer, but they're living healthier and they're living better lives. Our material lives, too, have been getting better rather than getting worse. The newspaper stories you customarily read would tell you that we should be worrying about running out of natural resources, copper, or wheat, what have you. But the history of the past 200 years, in fact, the whole history of humanity, has shown us the extraordinary event, contrary to all common sense, that the more that we use of natural resources, the more we have of them. That is, rather than natural resources becoming more scarce as we use them, they have been becoming more available. When I say more available, I mean that when we look at natural resources with the measure that we as economists use, and the measure that's important to us as consumers, that is, how much do we have to pay to get these resources? We see that the price of natural resources has been going down rather than up throughout all of human history. Let's take an example. If you want a ton of copper delivered on your front lawn, it would only cost you about 1/20th as much of the most valuable thing you have, which is your human time, to earn enough to buy a ton of copper as it did 200 years ago. And it will only take you about 1/2000th as much of your time now to earn enough to buy a ton of copper as it would have 4,000 years ago. And it's the same story with every single natural resource. It's the same with iron. It's the same with aluminum. It's the same, you name it, it's the same story, that all of the natural resources, and that includes all the foods, wheat and corn and rice, all of them have been becoming more available rather than more scarce, contrary to all common sense, to all standard Malthusian thinking.
So that what you're saying is that more seems to be better. More people and more use of natural resources somehow does the reverse of what our common sense tells us.
That's exactly right. The more we use, the more we have. And perhaps we should take a minute to explain the process by which this occurs. When we use more of something, we have more people, when our income goes up so that we can buy more, there is for a while a shortage, either a real shortage or an expected shortage. We use more and the price goes up. But the process doesn't end here, and that's what's fundamental. In response to these shortages, some people look at the situation and say, aha, here's opportunity. The price is going up. If I can find some way to get my hands on some, I can sell some and make some money on it. So people begin to look around at this shortage and say, how can I find some more copper? Or how can I use the old copper mines to refine, to get the copper out more cheaply? Or how can I refine it more cheaply? Or even more important in the history of people, how can we find something to replace the copper with? So people look. Some succeed and some fail. And the people who succeed, sooner or later, in finding ways to supply our need for this copper in response to the higher price, find ways to do it. And the exciting part of it is that at the end point of this process, after people find new ways to supply our need for copper, we are left better off than if the problem had never arisen in the first place. That's what's extraordinary.
Yes, it is.
That we're left better off than if the problem had never arisen. And what this means is that we need our problems. In some fundamental way, we need bigger and better problems. That's not to say we should run out and create any problems, because we managed to create problems pretty well. But we do need our problems. If problems didn't arise, if population hadn't grown so that people ran short of food, if we still had 10 million people on Earth as we had perhaps 10,000 years ago, and people were still living an average of 30 years or less at birth, we wouldn't have had this fancy lunch that you and I had today, but instead we'd be out chasing rabbits and digging roots. Not worried about a shortage of rabbits or roots, but that's the kind of lunch we would have had.
Well, it seems to me most people would agree with the, if you would, the technological side of what you're saying, that problems create challenge which lead to new ways to meet those and increasing standard of living. But I don't think nearly as many people would agree with you on the people side, that we need all these people around. And yet you feel very strongly about that.
Well, imagine it. Cast your mind back to this thought experiment which I raised with you a minute ago. Imagine what would have happened if we, the population of our Earth had remained at 1 million or 10 million people as it was tens of thousands of years ago, 10,000 years ago perhaps. Do you think that the processes would have begun and played out so that we would now have the electricity to run this videotaping? Do you think that people would have come up with the ideas to produce television? Do you think that we would have had enough human minds and enough human imagination to have produced the air conditioning that's keeping this room cool, or the penicillin which may have cured your daughter of strep throat last month? I think that if we didn't have human beings to do two things, and let's name those two things. One is we need people to create more demand for things by using more, that is to make the problems, but we also need the people to create the solutions. So we need their mouths to eat and create the demand. We need their brains to create the ideas to supply our new needs. Without these, if population had never grown, we would, as I say, still be chasing rabbits and eating roots and trying to cool ourselves with fans instead of this air conditioning. And we would be lighting this room with, there wouldn't be a room here.
If you want more people, you must like people.